Hello, fellow cyborgs. Today I am going to be doing a catch-up book haul with you. Over the last, well, not couple months, the last book haul I had on my channel was in April. And since then, I have acquired from gifts or purchases by myself a little less than 30 books. However, I've been doing a good job of reading the books I've been purchasing, so I'm going to show you the books that I have purchased in the last few months and still have yet to read, and especially going to show you some of my brand new purchases, which were a bit of a splurge when I was visiting some fellow booktubers in the San Francisco area, and I've got some fun stories to show you or to tell you about those books. So let's get on with it. This is The House at Riverton by Kate Morton. I have read 3 other Kate Mortons, who's a kind of historical and just general fiction writer. I enjoy her stories, and my mom has recently been reading her, so that is why this has fallen into my lap. This was something my mom has read, and now she's passed it on to me. I will one day read this cozy historical mystery / regular fiction sort of book. It's nothing life-changing, but her books have consistently got 3 or 4 stars from me. I know what to expect, and I do like it. I also made my mom try Maureen Johnson's The Name of the Star, which is a YA ghost mystery sort of novel, which I read earlier this year and last year? I can't remember, and really enjoyed. This is the follow-up, The Madness Underneath, which my mom needed because she doesn't like having unfinished stories, even though this is the second in a series. I don't know if I think the third has to be out, but I'm not sure. Anyway, this is part of the Shades of London series, and one day, probably sooner rather than later, hopefully, I will read this copy. I am excited to see how Rory's adventure unfolds. It's not the best, but it's highly entertaining reading. Then a couple of Star Wars books I have here. Both of these have passed through my mom's hands before mine. There is Bloodline by Claudia Gray. I recently read Lost Stars by her, which is a YA Star Wars novel by the same author, so I'm interested to read her adult sector Star Wars fiction. And then also Kenobi by John Jackson Miller. My mom didn't love this one. She thinks that it should have been called Tatooine instead of Kenobi, but we will have to see what I think about it in the future. You guys already know that I have been buying and reading a lot of classics. Well, you know I've been reading a lot of classics, but I've been buying a lot of classics too, but I have read all of them except for this one so far. This is Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. You saw in my Victober wrap-up I had intended to read this, but it just needs a little bit more time and attention than I could give it in October, so Acacia and I will be hoping to read this in January of the next year, 2018. It's coming up around the corner. So Daniel Deronda is still on my shelves. All right, now on to the books that are most brand new to me. I went up to San Francisco, the San Francisco area, with Hillary from Your Robot Friend, Sarai from Sarai Talks Books, and Kristen from Vienna Waits Books, and it was one of the most lovely long weekends that I've ever had. One day in the vacation was just my favorite day of the year, so it was just a wonderful, wonderful trip. I'll tell you bits and pieces about some of the trip when it's relevant with the books that I'm showing you, but this is a book haul and not a let me tell you about my vacation video. So let's get started. Going into the trip, I had a few kind of more obscure classics on my list of things to look out for because they're kind of hard to find online. I only managed to find one of them in stores. I actually found a couple copies, but I liked this one. This is The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. It comes highly recommended from Katie from Books and Things. This is a Dickensian sort of plot with many characters and characters related to characters and a bunch of different timelines and plot lines and, well, not timelines, plot lines. So this looks like a big chunker, but my copy is only like 475 pages long or something, so they must have just printed this on cardboard, and it's also got pretty big writing, so I need to remind myself when I see this on my shelves that it's actually probably more like this size spine, you know? So I'm eager to get to this sometime. I don't have any immediate plans, but I'm glad that I could support a local bookshop, even if it wasn't local for me when I'm currently home, instead of just buying online and kind of, sometimes getting books with holes in them or wonky covers. So excited to read this in the future. This next book was the riskiest of my purchases, a book that I knew the least about and had never been recommended, and that is The Radiance of the King by Kamara Laye. Lay? I'm not sure. I was supposed to look this up, but then I got lazy. This is translated from French by James Kirkup, and this is an African author of Upper Guinea who's writing this story. This, I first got my attention, I don't even know how it got my attention, but I pulled it out and saw it was introduced by Toni Morrison, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this changes everything. So this seems to be a story about Clarence, a white man who's shipwrecked off the coast of Africa. He runs into a village and demands to see the king, and he's told that the king is not in residence, he's traveling. So Clarence embarks on a trip with a few companions to find the king. Along the way, he is stripped of his privilege and sold into slavery, and at the end of this phantasmagorical story, it sounds like it's going to get weird, but in a good way, he kind of learns humility and humanity. I'm very excited to read this. I'm kind of hoping to read about white people kind of getting their comeuppance and being better people because of it. Does that make sense? I really don't have super high expectations, but I mean, if Toni Morrison really likes this, then I'm going to give it a try. I'm really excited. I hope to get to this sooner rather than later because I feel like risky picks, you kind of need to just, not let go of that excitement and the reason why you picked it up in the first place. I also have decided that I love these New York Review book editions. I don't know why. I just really like them. And the only sketchy thing about it is that a lot of the titles they publish are ones that you know nothing about, which means they could be hidden gems or they could be like, okay. So we'll see about this one. Then I confessed to Hillary and Sarai that I have read very little literature translated from Spanish or Portuguese, i.e. written by Latin American authors. And so they decided that I needed to correct that, and I agreed with them heartily, and to just go with the top, that being 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. My edition is translated by Gregory Rabassa. I am really looking forward to reading this for the first time, and I'm going to be buddy reading it with all the gals of the trip, Kristen, Sarai, and Hillary, in January. They have all already read this and love it, so they will be rereading it with me as I read it for the first time. I'm very excited. This, from what I can tell, is a magical realism family saga, and as you know, with my love of East of Eden, family sagas can be my jam, so I'm very looking forward to seeing if I love this as much as they do. The Radiance of the King introduction by Toni Morrison just got Morrison on the brain. I talked with Sarai about where I should go next, chronologically, starting with The Bluest Eye or hitting the all-time excellent favorite, Beloved, and I picked Beloved. I found this really nice Penguin Great Books of the 20th Century edition because unfortunately Toni Morrison's books tend to have not the most compelling covers, but I very much like this one. Beloved is a historical fiction, magical realism sort of story that is based on historical fact, but isn't out to, accurately retell these events, is from my knowledge. Toni Morrison is one of my new favorite authors, definitely my favorite Black author, though that's not really saying much because I'm still exploring that avenue of authorship. So I'm very excited to get to this sometime next year. Hopefully it will be intense, but in a manageable Morrison sort of way. So I will let you know when I know. Then we drove down one day to Salinas Valley to the John Steinbeck Center and the National John Steinbeck Center. The National Steinbeck Center, that's what it's called. And it was the most lovely thing. The exhibit was excellent. We talked to a docent that talked to us about how Steinbeck never puts detail into his stories without real thoughtful purpose. And he talked to us about a detail in Of Mice and Men that I'm not going to discuss with you because it's a big spoiler for that story. But it was just mind-blowing. We watched a 10-minute biography of John Steinbeck, and a couple of us were like, I think I'm going to cry because there was just a lot of feelings. The center was absolutely fantastic. The main exhibition is you walk through this huge room that is now divided into twisty little compartments, and each room, each section is about a different novel or story that John Steinbeck has written. It's not exhaustive, but you get all of the major ones. It's super interactive. You get to open mailboxes and turn photographs and ride on Ford Model Ts and even a pony, a fake pony, if you're a child, which we weren't, unfortunately. It was just fantastic. After the exhibit, we had to go to the gift shop, and I had already intended on picking up To a God Unknown, whose title title I always forget. This is a not very well talked about Steinbeck, but it's one of the ones that I don't currently have on my shelves, and it uses some of the buzzwords I like ancient pagan beliefs, the great Greek epics, and the Bible all inform this extraordinary novel. A son believes his father is in this great tree on their land, and then things happen. It's a mystical tale exploring one man's attempt to control the forces of nature and ultimately understand the ways of God. I'm not super interested in the God part of this, but I am interested in the pagan and mythical, and I'm just going to see what John Steinbeck does with this. I also found, and I decided to pick up, because Journal of a Novel, The East of Eden Letters by John Steinbeck. So when he was writing East of Eden, every day he sat down to write, he would write a warm-up letter to his editor and friend Pat, and this is a collection of those letters, part autobiography, part development of a novel. It's just all of the adorableness which I hope to find in John Steinbeck the man rather than John Steinbeck and his fiction novels. I am currently rereading East of Eden and hope to pick this up right after, so fingers crossed that fits into my nonfiction November theme, I guess. At the counter, there was a stamp, and so I got to, it was so cool, stamp the books that I purchased in the Steinbeck Center, and I also stamped my old 1960s copy of East of Eden, and it makes me so incredibly happy. From there, we heard that the Steinbeck house was just 2 blocks away, so we decided to walk there, even though we knew that the house was closed on Mondays, which was a super bummer. But when we got there, there was a volunteer working in the front lawn, and he saw us loitering, and he asked, are you interested in the Steinbeck house? And we said, yeah. And he was like, well, do you want to come in? And we said, yes, we do. And there were only a few moments where we were thinking maybe this is the beginning of a horror movie and we're about to die, but he was a lovely, generous man who just wanted to spread the love of Steinbeck and the interest in Steinbeck. He took us on a private tour all over the house, told us about the different rooms. He told us stories about John Steinbeck that just blew my mind. It was a once-in-a-lifetime sort of experience, and it's something that I will never forget, and it was my favorite day of the year. It was just absolutely amazing. So that was my one definite memory I wanted to share with you guys. Salinas Valley, please, if you are at all interested in Steinbeck, if you love even one of his novels, please make a pilgrimage to the National Steinbeck Center and to the house, which is now currently a restaurant run by volunteers, and just do it, because life-changing for me. It was absolutely lovely. It was magical. I really can't top that, but I do have one more book to talk about, and that is All the Names by Jose Saramago, which is translated by Margaret Jull Costa. This is a recommendation from Hillary. She's been telling me about it for months and months, and so when I saw it in a local bookshop, I said, this is a perfect time to just make good on my promise to try this book out. It's a death-related sort of book. It deals with our main character. He works in a government office where he files marriage, birth, and death certificates. He comes across the papers of an anonymous young woman, and his intrigue is piqued, and the story rolls on from there. So I am really excited to give this a try, and I am so pleased that I got to purchase this in the presence of the person who recommended it to me. I think that's just one of the most special things for a book reader and for a book recommender. So those are the 12 books I wanted to share with you today. I think 12 unread out of the 30 or so that I've acquired since April is pretty good, considering that about 7 of those were very, very recent purchases, and I haven't really had time to check them off my list yet. Please let me know what the most exciting book purchase for you was in the last few months. I hope you are having a wonderful day and reading something that you are loving. And until next time, continue to be lovely.